After the battle, she gave me her father's sword. No one else deserves it, but you. The unexpected alliance. Morning mist clung to the battlefield, like a shroud, concealing the carnage that had unfolded just hours before. Captain Ethan Cross knelt beside a fallen warrior, checking for signs of life among the Valdorian soldiers who had fought so valiantly against the Crimson Horde. His uniform, once pristine blue and gold, was now torn and stained with mud and blood. Still breathing, he murmured, lifting the wounded man onto his shoulders. As a medic in the Allied forces, Ethan had sworn to save lives regardless of which side they fought for. War was senseless enough without letting honor die with it. A rustle in the nearby brush made him freeze. From the shadows emerged a figure he recognized immediately, Princess Zara Valdoran, daughter of the legendary General Valdoran who had fallen in yesterday's battle. Her violet eyes, usually fierce in combat, now held a mixture of grief and wariness as she surveyed the scene. "You're helping our wounded," she observed, her voice carrying the melodic accent of her mountain people. Her dark hair was braided with silver threads, a mark of her royal status. Though her leather armor bore the same battle scars as any common soldier, Ethan slowly stood, his hands visible and empty. "A wounded man is just a wounded man, Your Highness. Politics don't matter when someone's dying." Zara studied him for a long moment. The Valdorians and the Allied forces had been enemies for 3 years, their kingdoms locked in a bitter territorial dispute. Yet here was an enemy soldier risking his own safety to save her people. "The Crimson Horde retreated north," she said finally, "but they'll regroup and return within days. My father's death has left our forces scattered." Her voice caught slightly at the mention of her father, but she quickly composed herself. "I'm sorry for your loss," Ethan said sincerely. "General Valdoran was a man of honor. Even we spoke of his courage with respect." Something in his tone seemed to reach her. "You speak as if you knew him. We met once, under a flag of truce. He could have had me killed when I was captured last spring, but instead he treated me with dignity and arranged a prisoner exchange." Ethan's eyes distant with memory. "He said that even enemies could recognize honor in each other." Zara's expression softened slightly. "That sounds like something father would say." She looked around at the battlefield, then back at Ethan. "The Horde will return, and when they do, neither of our armies will be strong enough to stop them alone." What are you suggesting?" "A temporary alliance. Pool our remaining forces. Drive back the Horde, then we can return to our own disputes." She extended her hand. "I am Princess Zara Valdoran, commander of the Mountain Guard." Ethan clasped her hand, noting its surprising strength. "Captain Ethan Cross, 7th Medical Battalion. But I think you already knew that." A slight smile played at her lips. "Your reputation precedes you. Captain, the soldier who refuses to carry weapons, yet has saved more lives than any warrior. Healing is its own form of warfare," he replied. "Though I suspect we'll both need to take up swords before this is over." As if summoned by his words, a horn sounded in the distance, the rallying call of the Crimson Horde. Zara's hand instinctively went to the ornate sword at her side, her father's blade, passed down through generations of Valdorian royalty. "There, moving faster than expected," she said grimly. "Can you fight as well as you heal, Captain?" Ethan looked at the wounded man still slung across his shoulders, then at the determined princess before him. "I've never killed a man, Your Highness, but I've also never let one die if I could prevent it." "Then perhaps you're exactly what this alliance needs," Zara replied. "Someone who fights for life rather than death." As they made their way toward the Valdorian camp, neither could have predicted how this fragile alliance would reshape not only the war, but their own hearts as well. Bonds forged in Fereth Valdorian camp buzzed with tension as Princess Zara led Captain Ethan through the maze of tense and defensive positions. Suspicious glances followed them from every direction. Her own people couldn't understand why she'd brought an enemy soldier into their midst, especially not now, with their grief still fresh and their defenses weakened. "Your Highness," called out Commander Thane Blackstorm, Zara's childhood friend and most trusted officer. His weathered face bore fresh scars from the recent battle, and his gray eyes held barely contained hostility as they fixed on Ethan. Surely you don't intend to trust this allied spy with our battle plans? Zara stopped walking, her violet eyes flashing with authority. Captain Cross saved 12 of our wounded this morning. Thane, while we mourned, he acted with honor. That's more than can be said for some of our supposed allies, who fled at the first sign of the Horde's return. Ethan felt the weight of dozens of stares, but kept his expression neutral. He understood their mistrust. In their position, he would feel the same way. Commander Blackstorm, he said respectfully, I know my presence here is unusual, but the Crimson Horde is our common enemy now. They've burned villages from both our kingdoms. Thane's hand rested on his sword hilt. Pretty words from someone whose people have been trying to conquer our lands for 3 years. Enough, Zara commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. We don't have time for this. The Horde will be here by sunset, and we need every advantage we can get. She turned to address the gathered soldiers. Captain Cross is under my personal protection. Anyone who challenges that challenges me directly. The crowd slowly dispersed, though the muttering continued. Thane lingered, his expression troubled. Zara, your father's death has affected us all. But this decision, my father would have made the same choice, she interrupted. He believed in honor above all else. This man has shown more honor in one morning than our so-called allies have in months. As they reached the command tent, Ethan couldn't help but notice how naturally Zara had taken command. Despite her youth, she couldn't be more than 25. She carried herself with the confidence of someone born to lead. Her officers respected her, even when they disagreed. Inside the tent, maps covered a large wooden table, marked with troop positions and strategic points. Zara pointed to various locations as she explained their situation. We have maybe 300 effective fighters left. The Horde has twice that number, plus their siege engines. Ethan studied the maps carefully. What about the canyon passes? Here, he indicated a narrow area between the peaks. If we could funnel them through there. It's too obvious, Thane objected. They'll see the trap immediately. Not if we make them think we're retreating in panic, Ethan replied thoughtfully. Create a false camp here. Make it look like we're regrouping. When they charge through, the passes to crush our scattered forces. Zara's eyes lit up with understanding. We hit them from the high ground on both sides. It could work. She looked at him with new respect. You have a tactical mind, Captain. Why waste it on medical duties? Because every life saved is a victory, Ethan replied simply. But I'll do whatever it takes to stop the Horde from burning more villages. As they worked through the night, planning their desperate gambit, Ethan found himself stealing glances at Zara. When she concentrated on the maps, a small line appeared between her brows. When she smiled at a clever suggestion, her whole face transformed. He'd expected a pampered princess. Instead, he found a warrior scholar who genuinely cared about her people. Captain, she said during a brief break, stepping outside the tent to look at the stars. May I ask you something personal? Of course, Your Highness. Just Zara, please, we're allies now. She turned to face him. Why did you really come here? You could have retreated with your own forces. Ethan was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. 3 days ago, I watched a Horde raider burn down a school with children inside. Allied children, Valdorian children. It didn't matter to him. They were just obstacles. His voice grew hard. I became a medic to preserve life. Some enemies need to be stopped before they can take more of it. Zara nodded slowly. My father used to say that the measure of a person isn't which side they fight for, but what they're willing to sacrifice for others. Their eyes met in the moonlight, and for a moment, the war seemed very far away. Then a sentry's call broke. The spell, enemy scouts had been spotted. It begins, Zara whispered, her hand moving to her father's sword. The heat of battle dawn broke gray and ominous over the mountain pass, the sky heavy with storm clouds that seemed to mirror the approaching conflict. Ethan crouched behind a boulder on the eastern ridge, his medical supplies secured in his pack. But for the first time in his career, he also carried a sword. A simple blade Zara had pressed into his hands with a meaningful look. Remember, came Zara's voice through the speaking tube they'd rigged between positions. Wait for my signal. Let them think they have us cornered. Below in the false camp, Commander Thane and 50 volunteers played their parts perfectly, rushing about in apparent panic, loading wagons with fake supplies and shouting orders that suggested imminent retreat. The bait was set. The Crimson Horde appeared at the mouth of the canyon like a red tide, their brutal war cries echoing off the stone walls. At their head rode General Cater the Merciless, his black armor gleaming with the blood of conquered cities. Ethan felt his stomach clench as he recognized the banners. These were the same raiders who had burned the school, overconfident, muttered Sergeant Luna Steele, the Valdorian archer positioned beside him. They think we're broken. Ethan watched Zara's position on the opposite ridge. Even at this distance, he could see her distinctive silhouette, her father's sword ready in her hand. Something had changed between them during their planning sessions. Looks that lingered too long, conversations that touched on more than military strategy. In the space of a few days, she had become more than an ally. The Horde charged down the canyon, their bloodthirsty roars growing louder. Ethan's grip tightened on his sword hilt. He'd never taken a life, but watching these butchers approach, he felt something cold and determined settle in his chest. Zara's horn sounded once, then twice, the signal. Arrows rained down from both ridges as the Valdorian archers revealed themselves. The Horde's front ranks stumbled and fell, but their momentum carried them forward. Ethan drew his sword and leaped down from his position with the other fighters, his medical training giving him an unexpected advantage. He knew exactly where to strike to disable rather than kill. The battle was chaos. Steel rang against steel. Men screamed and fell, and the narrow canyon became a maelstrom of violence. Ethan found himself fighting back to back with Thane, their earlier animosity forgotten in the face of shared danger. "Behind you," Thane shouted, and Ethan spun to parry a Horde warrior's axe. His sword work clumsy but effective. The medical precision he used to save lives now served to preserve his own. Across the battlefield, he caught glimpses of Zara leading her fighters with brilliant tactical awareness. She moved like a dancer, her father's sword cutting through enemy ranks with deadly grace. But the Horde was adapting, beginning to form up in defensive squares instead of charging blindly forward. "We need to end this quickly," Luna called out, loosing another arrow. "They're regrouping." That's when Ethan saw him, General Cater himself, cutting his way toward Zara's position with his personal guard. The Horde commander had identified her as the key to Valdorian resistance, and he meant to end it personally. "Zara," Ethan shouted, but his voice was lost in the din of battle. He watched in horror as Cater's guards surrounded her position, trapping her and her fighters on a narrow ledge. Without thinking, Ethan broke from the main fight and sprinted toward the opposite ridge. He couldn't reach her in time by conventional means, but there was a rope bridge, old and probably unstable, but it might hold long enough. "Captain, where are you going?" Thane yelled after him. Ethan didn't answer. He reached the bridge just as he saw Cater's blade meet Zara's in single combat. She was skilled, but the general was bigger, stronger, and had years more experience. Ethan crossed the swaying bridge as fast as he dared, his heart pounding with more than just exertion. He reached her position just as Cater's heavy blade smashed through Zara's guard, sending her father's sword flying from her hand. The general raised his weapon for the killing blow, a triumphant sneer on his scarred face. "No." Ethan threw himself between them, his sword catching Cater's descending blade with a jarring impact that sent shockwaves up his arms. The general's eyes widened in surprise. He hadn't expected a rescue, especially not from an obvious non-combatant. "Run, Zara," Ethan gasped, struggling to hold back the general's superior strength. But she didn't run. Instead, she rolled toward her fallen sword, snatched it up, and struck like a viper. Her father's blade took Cater in the side, piercing his armor where it joined at the waist. The general staggered, his grip loosening on his weapon. Together, they drove him back. Seeing their leader wounded, the Horde's morale finally broke. The raiders fled back up the canyon, leaving their dead behind as the sounds of battle faded. Ethan and Zara found themselves alone on the ledge, both breathing hard, both alive against the odds. "You saved my life," she said softly. "You saved mine first," he replied. Their eyes met, and this time, neither looked away. Heart's unveiled victory celebration in the Valdorian camp felt subdued. Despite their triumph, too many good people had died, and everyone knew the Crimson Horde would eventually return with reinforcements. But for now, the immediate threat was past, and the uneasy alliance between former enemies had proven itself in blood. Ethan sat outside the medical tent, tending to his own wounds while keeping an eye on the wounded, his sword arm ached from the encounter with General Cater, and he had a deep gash across his ribs that he'd bound with field dressings. Around him, Valdorian and allied soldiers lay side by side, their conflicts temporarily forgotten in shared pain and relief. "You're a terrible patient," came a familiar voice. Zara approached carrying a proper medical kit, her own armor replaced with a simple tunic and leather pants. Without waiting for permission, she knelt beside him and began examining his bandages. "I'm fine," Ethan protested, though he didn't pull away from her gentle touch. "The others need attention more than I do. The others have been seen to," she replied firmly, carefully unwrapping his makeshift bandages. "Commander Thane insisted I check on you personally. I think you've earned his respect." Ethan winced as she cleaned the wound with practiced efficiency. "You know field medicine? Mountain warfare requires it," Zara explained, her fingers surprisingly gentle as she worked. "My father insisted I learn every skill my soldiers would need." Her voice caught slightly at the mention of her father, as it had each time since his death. "He would be proud of you today," Ethan said softly. "The way you led the battle, held your people together. You've become the leader he knew you could be." Zara's hands stilled for a moment. "Some days I feel like I'm just pretending to be strong enough for this responsibility." She looked up at him, her violet eyes vulnerable in the lamplight. "Today, when Cater had me trapped, I thought it was over. Then you appeared like something out of a legend. I couldn't watch you die," Ethan admitted. "These past few days, fighting beside you, seeing how much you care about your people. You've changed something in me." Their faces were close now, close enough that he could see the flecks of silver in her eyes, could smell the subtle scent she wore, something like mountain flowers and steel. The space between them seemed charged with unspoken possibilities. "Ethan," she whispered, and the way she said his name made his heart race. Before either could say more, Commander Thane appeared at the tent entrance, clearing his throat diplomatically. "Your Highness, the War Council is ready to convene." Zara sat back reluctantly. The moment broken, but not forgotten. "Of course, Captain Cross, you should attend as well. Your tactical insights proved invaluable today." The War Council convened. In the command tent, representatives from both armies gathering around the map table. The mood was cautiously optimistic. They had won a significant victory and proven that cooperation between their forces was possible. "The question now," said General Morrison, the ranking Allied officer, "is what happens next. The Horde will return, but it will take them weeks to gather reinforcements. Long enough for our kingdoms to negotiate a formal alliance," Thane suggested. "This temporary cooperation could become something more permanent." Ethan watched Zara as she considered this. He could see the wheels turning in her mind, calculating political implications alongside military ones. She was born for this kind of leadership, able to see the bigger picture while never losing sight of the human cost. "I propose we send joint envoys to both capitals," she said finally. "Let our rulers see that their soldiers can fight together, can trust each other. But we maintain our defensive positions here in case the Horde returns." Before negotiations are complete, the council agreed, and as the meeting broke up, Ethan found himself walking with Zara toward her private quarters. The night air was cool and clean, a sharp contrast to the blood and smoke of the battlefield. "Will you be part of the envoy to the Allied capital?" she asked as they paused outside her tent. "I suspect I will," Ethan replied. "My commanding officers will want a full report on this alliance." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both aware that their time together might be ending soon. Military alliances were one thing, but personal relationships between former enemies were far more complicated. "Zara," Ethan began, then stopped, unsure how to voice what he was feeling. She stepped closer, close enough to touch. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too, this time." No interruptions came. When she kissed him, it was with the passion of someone who had faced death and chosen life. who had found something precious in the midst of chaos, Ethan responded with equal fervor, his arms encircling her as if he could hold back the inevitable complications their feelings would bring when they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Zara rested her forehead against his. Whatever happens with the politics, with our kingdoms, this is real. Yes, he agreed, his voice rough with emotion. But real doesn't make it simple. The best things never are, she replied, then stepped back with visible effort. Tomorrow we begin planning the envoy missions. Tonight I want to remember what we're fighting for. As she disappeared into her tent, Ethan remained outside, looking up at the stars and wondering how a simple medic had found himself at the center of events that could reshape to kingdoms, the sort of legacy 3 weeks later. The joint envoy mission had achieved what years of formal diplomacy could not. The Alliance Valdorian Accords were signed in a ceremony that saw both kingdoms commit to mutual defense and trade agreements. Ethan stood in the great hall of Castle Valdoran, wearing the dress uniform of a newly appointed diplomatic liaison, watching as history was made. But his eyes kept drifting to Zara, resplendent in royal blue silk, her father's sword at her side, as she formally accepted the treaty on behalf of her people. The weeks of negotiation had been successful beyond anyone's hopes, but they had also kept them apart, surrounded by advisors and protocol. Quite a change from that battlefield came. A voice beside him, Commander Thane approached, looking surprisingly comfortable in formal dress. Who would have thought an enemy medic would help broker peace between our kingdoms? People can surprise you, Ethan replied, still watching Zara. Sometimes what looks like weakness is actually the greatest strength. Thane followed his gaze and smiled knowingly. She's been distracted during the negotiations. Happy, but distracted. I wondered why. The ceremony concluded with speeches and formal toasts. But as the celebration moved to the castle's great gardens, Ethan found himself drawn to a quieter balcony overlooking the mountain valley. The setting sun painted everything in shades of gold and crimson, and for a moment, he could almost forget the complexities of politics and duty. Avoiding the party, Zara's voice came from behind him. She had changed from her formal gown into a simpler dress, though she still wore her father's sword. Too many people wanting to discuss trade routes and defensive pacts, Ethan replied. Turning to face her, I preferred it when our biggest concern was just staying alive. She joined him at the balcony railing, close enough that their shoulders touched. The horde has been spotted moving north, toward the frozen wastes. Our spies think they're retreating to regroup, but it could be years before they return in force. And what happens to us in the meantime? Ethan asked. You're a princess with a kingdom to help rule. I'm a medic from a foreign land. The treaty is one thing, but, she prompted, though there was something in her tone that suggested she already knew what he was thinking. But we're from different worlds, Zara. Your people have accepted me as an ally, but accepting me as something more to their princess? That's a much bigger ask. Zara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers absently tracing the pommel of her father's sword. Do you know the full history of this blade? She asked finally. Ethan shook his head, confused by the apparent change of subject. It was forged 3 centuries ago by Master Aldrich the Wise, and he built something special into it, a test of character. The sword can only be drawn by someone with true honor, someone worthy of defending what matters most. She met his eyes. My father could draw it, his father before him. It's been passed down through generations of Valdorian royalty. It's a beautiful blade, Ethan said, still not understanding her point. Zara smiled, an expression full of love and mischief. This morning, I discovered something interesting. The sword has never responded to me the way it did to my father. Oh, I can draw it, wield it effectively, but it never felt alive in my hands. She stepped closer, drawing the sword and offering it to him hilt first. Try it. Zara, I can't. That's your family legacy. Try it, she insisted. Please. Hesitantly, Ethan grasped the hilt. The moment his fingers closed around it, the sword seemed to come alive. The metal hummed with some inner warmth, and the ancient runes carved into the blade flickered with a soft blue light. It felt perfect in his hand, balanced and eager, as if it had been waiting for him. By the mountain spirits, Zara breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. It's choosing you. I don't understand, Ethan whispered, staring at the glowing blade. The sword doesn't care about bloodlines or kingdoms. Zara explained, her voice thick with emotion. It cares about honor, courage, the willingness to sacrifice for others. Everything my father saw in you, everything I see in you. She reached out and covered his hand with hers, both of them holding the sword together. In the old traditions, when the family blade chooses someone outside the bloodline, it means they're meant to become family. It's a sign of destiny, Ethan's heart raced as he understood what she was saying. Is this a proposal? Zara smiled, tears glittering in her violet eyes. I suppose it is, though I should warn you. Marrying into the Valdorian royal family comes with certain responsibilities. You'd be expected to help defend the kingdom, serve as a diplomatic liaison, maybe even learn to enjoy state dinners. I can handle state dinners, Ethan replied, his voice rough with emotion. But are you sure, once we do this, there's no going back? I'll never be anything but a commoner who got lucky. You'll be the man who saved my life, who helped broker peace between our kingdoms, who carries my father's sword with honor. Zara stepped closer until they were almost touching. You'll be the man I love, and who I hope loves me in return. More than you know, Ethan whispered, then kissed her with all the passion and promise he could convey. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Zara pressed her forehead against his. The sword is yours now, she said softly. No one else deserves it but you. But I come with it. If you'll have us both, forever, Ethan promised, and meant it with every fiber of his being. As the celebration continued below them, the former enemies-turned lovers stood together on the balcony, sharing a sword that had chosen them both, and a future that neither could have imagined when they first met on that blood-soaked battlefield. The war was over. Their life together was just beginning, the end.